Have you ever wanted to explore culturally significant locations? By experiencing historical moments through the eyes of the common folk of the time, so that you, in the present day, can attempt to defeat an evil ancient god that has been haunting humanity since the beginning of time, who is currently hiding in the basement of a home in a small town in New England? Then I have a game for you. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem is a 2002 GameCube exclusive action-adventure/horror game. It was developed by Silicon Knights and published by Nintendo. Being more known for their family-friendly lineup, Nintendo wanted to expand into more mature-themed content. This collaboration led to Eternal Darkness to be the first release to be given a mature rating for any game published by Nintendo themselves. Originally slated for an N64 release, the flop of the 64 disk drive add-on and the imminent release of the GameCube saw development moved at the last minute to the newer hardware, with high hopes of being a release title for the GameCube's late 2001 launch. But because so much of the gameplay, graphics, sounds, and cinematics had to be redone from scratch to fully take advantage of the new hardware, the release was delayed by about half a year just to button everything up. Now, Eternal Darkness is not shy about wearing its horror influences on its sleeve. Before the Nintendo boot logo even shows, there's a quote from The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Another huge influence being the main setting of the game, a creepy house in Rhode Island. This is a direct reference to H.P. Lovecraft, who lived most of his life in the state and whose stories heavily featured the area. As for this story, after being notified of her grandfather, Edward, untimely and gruesome demise, the protagonist, Alex Roivas, travels from her home in Seattle to her grandfather's house in Rhode Island. The local police's inability to get anywhere with the obvious homicide investigation spurs Alex to try to piece together the events herself. With a little exploration, you discover clues that reveal a hidden room inside the house. This is where Edward was documenting his macabre research. Herein you will find various historical artifacts and documents, most importantly of which is a grotesque leather-bound book called The Tome of Eternal Darkness. This book is the main plot driver throughout the game. When you first inspect it, you get a series of flash cuts foreshadowing strange locations and horrifying monsters. A voiceover from Edward provides a rather vague but fear-laden prologue to the story at hand. You then begin living a key moment in the life of a Roman military commander named Pius Augustus. He is in the middle of a relic hunting campaign in ancient Persia, circa 26 BC. You are exploring a temple that's been buried under the sands, and eventually discover a room with 3 artifacts, with apostrophe-laden names of course, that the game makes you choose from. There is no explanation of what choosing one over another will do, but after selecting one, a cutscene will play and you will watch as Pius painfully morphs into what will be the main antagonist of the game, forever enslaved by the eldritch god that the artifact represents, and tasked with summoning that ancient one into our world so it can feed on all of reality. The cutscene's voiceover gives you a hint on the consequence of your decision. Choosing red will make your enemies physically tougher, blue will make using magic harder, and green will make the character lose their mind a little easier. This choice right at the beginning of the game takes a weird spin on the classic spec-changing mechanic, making you choose your weakness instead of your strengths. With the premise and gameplay explained, now the game really kicks in. You'll be alternating between Alex in the present day, hunting through the house for clues and new chapters to the Tome of Eternal Darkness, which are hidden in various rooms, to heading back to the secret study to relive the past lives described in each chapter. So you are quite literally piecing together the story of the game as you progress. These chapters will take you on an adventure through the ages, all through the eyes of a variety of people in the area and time, each with their own stats and fighting styles. For example, a few of the characters you will inhabit include Elia, a Cambodian royal court dancer in the 10th century who goes off to seek adventure with a twin set of short swords and a blowgun. Karim, a young nobleman in 4th century Persia skilled in the curved sword and throwing discs. Anthony, a servant to King Charlemagne in 7th century France, who is armed with just a torch and a heavy sword you find along the way. Maximilian, an ancestor of Alex and previous owner of the Roivas home in the 16th century. He wields a saber and flintlock pistols. A 20th century monkey living in Santa Cruz, California. He rides around on a unicycle with an elephant that shoots peanuts. Wait, that's not right. In all, there are a dozen different characters to play as. And while there's only 4 unique locations that you will revisit, the fact that you are there at different points in time have a great effect on the stage layouts. Most notably, you first visit a small church on a French monastery in the year 814. You will later return to the same church in 1485 as a monk, where the church has been expanded into a smallish medieval cathedral. And upon returning again during World War I, the cathedral has been built up even further and is being used as a battlefront hospital. While some gameplay elements and slight storyline differences depend on which artifact Pius chooses early on, overall the story breaks down to a battle between cosmic old gods fighting each other for the rule of all reality, with Earth and its human inhabitants just minute but easily manipulated pawns in the greater struggles of the universe. The combat in Eternal Darkness involves an interesting twist on the usual hack and slash of the genre at the time. Instead of just a generic melee attack, the game lets you target specific body parts to sometimes funny and very satisfying ends. For example, if you decapitate an enemy, it will just start lashing out, blindly attacking whatever is in front of it. This leads to enemies fighting and killing each other, saving you from the trouble of having to hack them all down. A strategy that really helps later in the game when you're being swarmed by a room full of zombies. To go along with the physical combat, the game employs a rather robust magic system, allowing you to recover statuses, damage enemies, summon allies, enchant items, and dispel magical barriers. Throughout gameplay, you will acquire runes that can be combined in various ways to form different spells. This is a 3-stage process, accomplished by combining an action rune with a target rune and giving it an alignment. For instance, the action Absorb and the target Self combine to recover status, so pairing this with a red alignment rune will restore your health. While there are spell scrolls to find throughout gameplay that will give you the specific combination for the spells, you can play around with different combinations to discover them before actually finding the scroll that describes them. Now, the alignment reflects back to the 3 colors of the artifacts from the beginning of the game. They employ a sort of paper, rock, scissors aspect of dominance and weakness to the attunements. Early on, you can discover a painting in the mansion that hints at which attunements work best against the others, but you're not really guided to this information, or even told what this information is, which leaves you to figure it out on your own. Now, constructing spells through the menu can be quite tedious, especially when you get to the 7-rune circle. But the game lets you assign up to 4 spells, using the D-pad, for instant in-game selection, making swapping out the spells for whatever the situation calls for a breeze. While Eternal Darkness didn't sell so well on its initial release, the game garnered high praise from reviewers, and eventually gathered a large word-of-mouth cult following. So much so that years later there was talk of a sequel for the Wii U. But the Elder God's curse seemed to spill over from the game and into real life. Shortly after the sequel was hinted at, Silicon Knights fell on hard times, filed for bankruptcy, and shut down the studio. This was after a failed lawsuit against Epic Games over Unreal Engine 3 licensing issues. Then in 2013, a group of former Silicon Knights staff got together to form a new studio called Precursor Games. They set up a crowdfunding campaign for a spiritual successor to Eternal Darkness, titled Shadow of the Eternals. This did not reach its original funding target, so the campaign was shut down. Shortly thereafter, another campaign for a smaller goal was started. This too was abandoned after failing to meet the goal, and also a founding member and lead designer of the studio was involved with, let's just say, legal troubles and leave it at that. A third campaign also failed, even with the goal being half that of the first. With that, Shadow of the Eternals was announced to be delayed indefinitely, and Precursor Games was shut down. A second new studio was formed the following year, named Quantum Entanglement Entertainment, and Shadow of the Eternals was brought back to life, this time eschewing crowdfunding for being self-funded. But in early 2018, after 3 years, little to no updates, and no release, the project was abandoned yet again, and this new studio was quietly shut down. Since then, there has been no real talk of a sequel or successor, so I guess the Elder Gods won in the end. While the Lovecraftian horror visuals, multiple protagonists with varied gameplay styles, and a story that spans centuries sure is weird, not to mention the real-world effects after its release. The total package of Eternal Darkness, with its brilliant graphics, tight controls, engrossing story, and an engaging battle system, makes it a whole lot of fun. Thanks for... Wait. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Along with the health and magic, there's also a status level for your sanity, to which different levels causes the game to go in and out of what's known as sanity effects. But it's such a minor system and not really utilized in the game all that much. So it's not really all that weird and barely worth mentioning, right? I think. Anyway, thanks for watching.